So welcome back to Thrive, your agency resource. Get ready for a very timely and very purposeful conversation today. My guest is Kirk Souder, co-founder and leadership coach at ENSO, Leadership for Impact. Kirk and I are, let's call it kindred spirits, in that he coaches high-impact creative leaders to find their greatest possibilities in authentic leadership, purpose, and impact. Kirk, welcome to the show. I literally could not be more excited for this conversation.
Thanks, Kelly. It's really great to be here. And from our talks previously, you're right, we're very kindred spirits and souls, and it's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
So I do absolutely want to talk about the Soul Purpose Conference that's coming up later this month. But I really want to start with your journey. We have very similar journeys, and in the book that I'm writing, we'll kind of delve into how many people have a similar journey. But I want to talk about your journey from the perspective of how that led you to leave your role from president and chief creative officer to pursue what felt truly authentic to you.
Absolutely. So in a very quick nutshell, I started as a creative in the business. I started in New York. I moved out to Los Angeles. I started a company called Ground Zero. It was a very creatively accoladed agency. I continued to expand into the industry. I eventually became president and CCO of Ryan Publicis in San Francisco. And it was one of those moments where you seemingly arrive where you always wanted to arrive at, and yet it's kind of like finding this beautifully wrapped gift package you always wanted to get, and you open it up and there's really not a lot inside. And I spent 2 years in that role, and finally became aware that, as I was going into work, I was experiencing dread for the first time in my life. Instead of feeling excitement about what was going to happen that day, I was feeling dread. And the one thing that lit me up in my whole week whenever I was at work was I would get 2 or 3 phone calls, because I'm a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed at the age of 18 with what was then a terminal prognosis of stage 4 sarcoma, and managed to get through that. And the big gift from that, well, there was many gifts from that, but one of them was I'm on call to many hospitals and so on when a new patient comes in. And so these calls with these patients were so powerful for me, because I got to be a part of uplifting their consciousness about what was happening. And I said, maybe the dread I'm feeling in the traditional space is because I'm meant to do something else. And I, because of my cancer experience, because I was very intimately aware of the finiteness of this existence we're in, I resigned from my role and went back to grad school in a very experiential program, a master's in spiritual psychology. And it became way more for me than just becoming a counselor or something. It was a life-changing experience, an awakening to who I really am and what was really possible in this life. And so as I was nearing the time to leave that, I found myself in a wall, and that my soul really said it's about going out and being of service and purpose, and my brain was saying, but we have to make a living, you've got a couple kids, there's college in the future.
Right.
And I encountered this polarity which was stopping me, and through the actual experiential part of this program that I was in, I became aware that was just an idea I had.
Right.
That wasn't real. That was a notion.
Right. And I wanna read the quote that actually was in the email for when you actually announced Soul Purpose. You said, you have to make a choice. What brings you alive or what keeps you alive? You can't have both. You have your work that keeps you and your family fed, and you have your doing good. That stuff is on the other side that lights you up. It's not possible to bring them together. So what I would love to ask is, tell us how you really dismantled that line of thinking, because that polarity is very strong, and there is a reality to both parts, right? So how did you dismantle that?
Well, I became aware, because of the training I was in, the difference between what is my personal thinking and what is my true wisdom, my soul's wisdom. And when I would go into my soul's wisdom, it was like, who said that? Like, there's not some Rosetta Stone in the universe where that's like chiseled into. It's made up.
Right.
And reality is flexible. It's as flexible as our belief systems are. That there's this wonderful quote by an ecstatic poet, lived in the day of Rumi, where named Hafiz, who said, "Our words become the house we live in." And what he's saying is our reality is our beliefs. So when I saw that, when I gave awareness to that thought, that it was just a thought, it dissolved. And I really accepted a world where I could do something that really brings me alive, that had purpose to it, and make a good living at it. And within 2 days, I got a call from a company in Washington, D.C. I had never heard of, called GMMB. It was kind of an agency, PR company, political company, but all they did was positive impact projects and progressive politics. And by the way, he said, we're the lead agency for Obama for America, and we'd love you to come and be our partner and creative director. And it was like, it popped up the moment I accepted the possibility of that as a belief.
Right.
And so to make a long story short, being able to work on that campaign, meet then President-elect Obama, inspired me to come back to California. My family wanted to come back to California, and started ENSO, a company that is half agency, half innovation consultancy. We call ourselves an impact agency. We create big initiatives for big brands to make the world better. And what I do is lead our Leadership for Impact group, which is to actually work one-on-one with the consciousness of leaders, with coaching of leaders, to have them be able to make the same arc I did, so they can bring innovation and purpose and whatever comes forward for them into their business platforms that they're working in.
Right.
And it's the most amazing work in the world to see a leader, who's over a sizable global platform, have their own awakening, and then want to see that in the products and services of their brand and create a meaningful profit while they're doing it,
Right.
because that's what sustains it. That's what sustains the good works.
Yeah.
They're not opposites, they're complementary.
Right, right. You are speaking my language. I love the fact that you really emphasize because I think the and culture, it's like when we're having a conversation with someone and we're affirming of them, we say yes, and then we build on it, right? So that's sort of what you're doing when you talk about this. In terms of the coaching, can you share an example from the leadership coaching perspective of maybe a client that you worked with where you actually saw, the impact of your work, how the inner work with them impacted the outer world? I think that would be a great example to share.
Sure. When we did our very first Soul Purpose, a woman came who I had met a couple times casually. Her name's Kim Colmoni. She is the Senior Vice President and Global Product Design Lead at Mattel. And when she came to Soul Purpose, she had started to think about, purpose and in her life and in her business, and was honestly on the fence at that time of whether she was to stay with the company or to go and start her own kind of nonprofit. She identified through Soul Purpose that her kind of inner thing was to really empower the disenfranchised of the world somehow, and girls around the world, give them empowerment. And so through the work at Soul Purpose, she came to the understanding that, why would I go out into the world to start something new to do that when I am sitting on one of the biggest global platforms that exists, that is touching the lives of millions of girls every day? And, what she had already, started to put into works, but what she really then brought out into the world was a whole new different line of Barbies. She really revolutionized Barbie as a doll, in that, you know, she had already been working on a diversity line of Barbies of different colors, different races, different ethnicities, new body shapes and body sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, later when we started, after Soul Purpose, she asked me to become her coach, and we started to coach together. And one by one, we were able to let go of any limiting beliefs she had around her ability to bring these ideas forth in this company, and that they would be accepted, not rejected.
Right.
She had limiting beliefs going on about, like, would this be rejected? Would it not work? If I fail, will it doom all purpose-oriented projects, and so on? So through our work together, you know, she was able to let all that go and provide a space for greater flow of these purpose-oriented products moving out into the world, so that more and more girls could see themselves as part of the cultural story and know that as they were okay.
Right.
And even of late, in the last 6 months, Kim has released a disabled line of Barbies, a Barbie in a wheelchair, a Barbie with a prosthetic limb, which are also, you know, all of these things have become major business drivers for the brand as well, which again creates this virtuous cycle of purpose and profit that's so important.
Yeah, I love it. I was getting goosebumps as you were talking about that, because I think the real impact is, you know, it's not for the business. It's not really even for Kim. It's for the legacy and for the empowerment of these girls who have never seen anything other in their lifetime other than this perfect Barbie, you know, the airbrushed Photoshop magazine covers. And now they realize, you know, Barbie has always been beautiful. Now there are Barbies that look just like me, and they're just as beautiful. And that narrative is what we need to be sharing in the world. So I love it.
And that came from, really, I want to emphasize what that came from was, you know, yes, Kim wanting to do something purposeful and impactful in the world, but there was one step before that, which is Kim seeing who she really is, you know, as this, you know, pristine divine being having this human experience. And it's from that place that these ideas and energy flows, you know. A really great kind of very up-to-date dispatch about this is 2 weekends ago, I took Kim to a prison workshop that I do 2 or 3 times a year in a women's prison, helping the inmates of this prison, you know, do the same thing, kind of let go of their judgments. Most of them have been sexually abused and physically abused. It's kind of what got them into a life of crime. And I brought Kim there to see the miracle of when we do this work, even with these in a maximum security prison with lifer inmates, how the same process can happen. And it was such a joy to see Kim's facilitation of these women, and these women like waking up and realizing that they too were not their conditioning or their behaviors, but these incredible beings who could go out and not repeat their crimes.
Right.
And it was a beautiful part to this, and seeing Kim be able to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So to that end, why do you think most people believe that outer experience influences their inner reality? Like, where do you think that comes from? And maybe even how can we start to change those narratives?
Yeah, so it's simple enough how it happens, which is, you know, people engaged in this human experience, something happens, and instead of just observing it for what it is, we have this construct in ourselves, in our brains, called the ego. And the ego, its job is to kind of categorize and protect and so on. And so when something happens that isn't our preference, the ego says that's bad, and that creates then fear and worry, and we feel sad, right? Instead, there's another way of doing it, which is to say, that is not something that's bad or good. That's just something that's happening. How do I use it for my upliftment. And as a result, when we shift the things that are inside, then all of a sudden our outside changes, because all the outside is a reflection of what our current beliefs and thoughts are. And so the more we shift what's inside, the more the outside will shift. And that enables us to break the illusion that we're a victim of what's happening on the outside.
Right.
We're not. It's a projection of ours.
Right. Absolutely. And it's such an important conversation because, these things, these programming, the past experiences, whatever these conditions are, we keep telling ourselves the same thing over and over again. And we're basically just being tested to see, how and when we're actually going to break the cycle, right? Because breaking the cycle is what it's all about, changing the whole narrative. That's where the real work is. That's where the redefining what success means to us, right? That's where we can kind of come into our own purpose and still be profitable, right?
That's the big proof, Kelly, what you just said, which is when we begin to notice patterns in our life. Well, why is that pattern happening? The pattern is happening because we keep creating a situation, like, again, inner reality, creating outer experience. We keep creating that same situation until we respond to it differently.
Yep.
It's the Albert Einstein quote that, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right?
Yep. Yep.
So when we change our response to that pattern, then everything else changes, like what you're describing.
Yeah.
That is definitive proof of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So as we start to wrap up this conversation, which I wish we could have the show for 3 more hours, but as we start to wrap up, I would love for you to share some details about Soul Purpose, coming up later this month, and just share a little bit more about that, how people can learn about it, they can expect, all sorts of things like that.
Absolutely. So what Soul Purpose really is kind of like a 2.5-day boot camp for high impact leaders to come together from around the world. Right now we have them coming from Berlin, Rome, London, Latin America, all over America, to come and literally experience this arc from where they are now to fully and absolutely seeing who they are and what's available to them in terms of purpose and meaning, and then even how to actualize it in their current business platforms or beyond. And so it's over the last 10 years of my working with leaders on that arc, it's like, let's bring it out to a lot of people at the same time. And that's the format of Soul Purpose. So as a result, you have leaders who are going back to their teams and really, redefining how they're going to bring, new products and services into the profit model. We have, I use Kim again as an example. Kim went back and did an entire Soul Purpose for the entire design division of Mattel, to have everyone be able to start to think this way, in terms of possibilities, not constraints of the ego. So that's what happens in Soul Purpose. And, leaders leave with not just a plan for kind of actualizing what brings them alive within their platform, but a core group of collaborators from the workshop as kind of an accountability and support group, so that they're staying in touch with that energy that they were a part of, and it helps them, maintain that going out into the world.
And dates, times, location?
Right. So we decided to have this one right smack in the belly of the business universe, which is in the Financial and World Trade Center district of New York City. We're having it at the New York Academy of Sciences, which is 40 floors above the World Trade Center area. And the dates are September 20, 21st, and 22nd. In September, yeah.
Great. And so you can find out a little bit more about that at soulpurposenow.com. And I will definitely put that in the show notes for everyone, as well as a link to your website, Kirk. Thank you so much for this conversation. You know, it's near and dear to my heart, but I'm really hoping that other people are getting as much out of it as you and I have, and just can't thank you enough for your time today.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Kelly, for actually courageously bringing this work out to this industry, which for me is so ripe to use it to make big change in the world. We are the most able to do it as communicators. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This episode has been brought to you by Workamajig, the #1 creative agency management software. Show notes at thrive.workamajig.com. Find out how your creative agency can become more productive and more profitable. Schedule your demo at thrive.workamajig.com.